Chapter 1: The Arrival. The fire is almost ash now, my son. Sit close so the wind doesn't steal my words. You've asked what happened in Arcadia, why silence still follows me like a shadow that remembers my name. I will tell you, but listen carefully. This isn't a soldier's tale of glory. It's a memory that breathes when the world forgets to make a sound. I was young then, proud, certain that fear was something a Spartan could master. We had been called to Delphi, 10 of us, chosen to serve a prophecy spoken by the oracle herself. Her voice had sounded broken, half whisper, half warning, a sorrowful hiss, the voice of the forsaken. Brave men turned to silent stone. My commander treated it as an order, not a curse. I followed because that's what men of Sparta do. We march, we obey, we die well. The road from Laconia to the north stretched endless beneath a punishing sun. Dust clung to our sandals. Bronze armor turned our bodies into small furnaces. Still, the rhythm of marching was comfort. Footfalls, breath, the faint rattle of spear against shield. Routine keeps doubt quiet, but beyond the last olive groves, the land changed. The air thickened with damp earth and something metallic, a scent like blood drying on bronze. Forests older than memory swallowed the horizon. Roots rose from the ground like the veins of buried gods, and the light dimmed even before the sun set. By the third night, birds no longer sang, the men joked less. A quiet fell, heavy and deliberate, as if the world itself held its breath to listen. We made camp beneath an ancient oak whose branches knotted like clenched fists. The fire refused to burn bright, its smoke curled downward, searching the ground. I remember watching it and seeing faces in the grey, stone faces, mouths open, eyes wide in eternal surprise. I blinked, and they were gone. Fatigue, I told myself. The tricks of exhaustion. But the forest was too still. And stillness, I've learned, is never empty. When I finally lay down, my thoughts ran in circles, Spartan discipline unraveling into unease. Then it came, faint at first, almost imagined, a breath drawn through teeth, a hiss, slow, deliberate, alive, once, twice, then nothing. The silence afterward was worse than the sound itself, because silence can choose when to end. I remember gripping the earth beside me, feeling it tremble like the slow heartbeat of something buried deep below. Every instinct begged me to rise, to look, but I stayed still. In battle, you move toward danger. In Arcadia, movement felt like invitation. So I waited, counting breaths until dawn leaked pale gold between the trees. Only then did I let myself believe I'd dreamed it. But I hadn't. No man dreams the smell of iron in daylight or the taste of fear when the wind refuses to exist. The hiss had been real, and though I didn't know it then, it had already found us. That was how it began, my son, the silence that listens back. If stories like this keep you up at night, subscribe and turn on the bell, because what comes next is darker than you think. Chapter 2: Whispers in the Stillness. Stay with me, son. The stars look honest from here, but the night can lie when it wants to. What happened next was not thunder or omen. It was smaller than that, the kind of eerie night detail a man forgets until it returns years later, perfectly shaped, as if memory is a hand that never stops closing. We left that oak at first light and walked deeper into Arcadia, where paths remembered animals better than men. The air felt too heavy for the hour, thick and close, as though breath had to push its way through someone else's lungs before it reached mine. A mysterious presence kept pace beside the column, not seen but measured in the way our steps grew careful. I kept my eyes forward, counting time by the swing of my shield, telling myself this was only the forest teaching us humility. I have since learned that humility and warning are cousins. By midday, the insects vanished. No wing fret, no leaf prattle. Even our bronze seemed ashamed to ring. Every clink died the moment it was born, like the ground refused to remember it. The men didn't speak. They didn't need to. Silence does what a commander can't. It instructs without being heard. I marked the smell again, that faint metallic sweetness a soldier recognizes from the field after the shouting, when the wounded breathe in a different rhythm. It stained the tongue. It made water taste like someone else's memory. We camped early, not because we were tired, but because the light itself seemed to thin. I stacked kindling that would have leapt at any spark in Laconia, yet here it sulked into a low, stubborn glow. Smoke should climb. Ours crawled. It slid between our ankles and traced the dirt as if mapping the places where men had stood before us and learned not to again. In that grey, faces kept forming, open mouths, eyes stretched too far, as if the smoke remembered a haunted experience and wanted us to share it. I told myself a soldier's mind plays tricks to protect him from the bigger truth. The bigger truth waited anyway. When night took the trees, I listened, that is all. I lay on my side with my cloak to my chin and counted the gaps between my heartbeats. The forest gave nothing. Then something less than a sound arrived, the tassel tip of breath drawn through teeth. A hiss, threaded thin, far off and everywhere. It came, softened, returned, and in the small space beneath it, I heard another thing men seldom admit to hearing. A soft, strangled weeping. Not spectacle, not rage. The kind of private sorrow that leaks out when the body has forgotten how to keep it. I thought of the oracle's warning and tried to wear disbelief the way we wear armor. Disbelief is useful until it rusts. There were small proofs, the sort a true horror story lays down like stones across a river. The fire's circle of light never widened. The kindling refused to crackle. Our breaths fell into the same rhythm, then broke it, then refused to settle again. Once, while I watched the coals, the smoke drew a long curve around our camp, the kind of track a man might make dragging the haft of a spear if the spear were listening for an answer. I remember reaching toward it and stopping my hand in the air, not from fear, but from a knowledge that arrived without a messenger. Some invitations are written only for the eyes. I should name this for what it was: a paranormal encounter, a supernatural experience dressed in patience. But in the moment it felt almost domestic, as if grief had found a way to live among us. That is how the old terrors work. They do not leap, they settle. Near dawn, I rose to stretch the ache from my legs and saw our footprints ring the dead glow. At the outer edge, separate from all others, lay a single mark, a shallow drag through ash and dew, unbroken, the line of something long that had paused to listen and then kept circling. I knelt. The soil around it held no heel, no claw, only intention. I have faced ambush, famine, siege. None of them look back at you from the ground with the patience of a schoolmaster. Remember this, son. A scary story becomes a chilling story the moment you realize you are not the one telling it anymore. The night was narrating us, and we had not learned the words. We broke camp in silence and set for the narrow pass they call a mountain's throat. The trees gave way to slabs and shelves, where light forgets how to behave and stone learns too many shapes. I felt the watching again, not above or behind, but pressed between my shoulders like a hand that never quite pushes. That was when I saw the first suggestion of a face in the rock, and understood we were walking into a mouth that had been waiting to close. Chapter 3. Something watches me. You can still feel it in the air tonight, can't you? The way silence thickens just before something notices you. That's how it was in the past. The forest thinned into walls of stone that rose so high the light turned pale and tired before it reached the floor. Our footsteps didn't echo, they hid, tucking themselves behind the rocks like children caught where they shouldn't be. Every breath we took sounded borrowed. I've fought men who wanted me dead, but this was different. This was the sense of being studied by something that didn't hate, didn't love, only waited. Demetrios, our commander, moved ahead, cautious but proud. He was the kind of man who trusted formation more than instinct. The air had other plans. It slid cold along the back of my neck, not as wind, but awareness. The smell of copper grew stronger. The taste of it pulled saliva to my tongue the way battle does, that faint readiness before the first clash. I tried to steady my breathing, to remember Sparta's lessons, discipline of mind, silence of fear. But discipline means little when the world around you refuses to follow its own rules. The rocks pressed closer, the path winding through shadows that felt too deliberate to be random. I caught shapes in the stone, edges, hollows, a curve that looked too human to be accident. At first, I thought it was the imagination that grows out of fatigue, but as we moved deeper, those shapes multiplied. Cheeks, brows, a suggestion of mouths open mid-cry. The texture of panic turned to granite. I forced my eyes away. A Spartan learns early that attention is a weapon. You point it carefully, or it will turn on you. The others didn't speak. Each man stared straight ahead, pretending not to see what we all saw. The sound of sandals on gravel grew uneven, cautious. I counted the rhythm to keep from losing myself. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. 1, 2, 3. The pattern broke when a pebble dropped somewhere above, clicking down the slope. Slow, deliberate, like fingers tapping a drum to test our courage. It stopped before it should have. Stones don't stop when you can still hear your heart counting them. I remember Demetrios lifting his hand, the signal to halt. Even that small motion seemed dangerous, as if movement alone might reveal too much. We waited. Nothing followed. No breath, no step, no sound. The air thickened until it felt alive, pressing into our armor, creeping into our throats. Then came that subtle shift every soldier knows. The quiet understanding that we were no longer moving through space. Space was moving around us. When we started again, the pass pinched tight enough that our shields brushed both walls. Every step scraped softly, whispering against the stone. I looked down once and saw the pattern again, the smooth drag through dust, looping lazily between our footprints like a line drawn by a hand that couldn't die. The trail was old but fresh, if such a thing can exist, made by something that returned often enough to keep it from fading. Ahead, the rock curved, and a darker hollow waited beyond it. I felt the urge to call out, to fill that emptiness with my voice, but instinct killed the thought. In Arcadia, sound was debt, and the forest always collected. I shifted my shield just enough to catch the reflection of the turn ahead. For an instant, I thought I saw the rim of another shield beyond the corner, bronze glinting faintly in half-light. A trick, I told myself. But when I blinked, it was gone. Still, the feeling didn't fade. The presence behind us grew heavier, its patience almost human. My skin crawled beneath the leather. I tightened my grip on the spear, not because I meant to use it, but because a man must hold something when the world stops belonging to him. Then, at the bend, the path widened suddenly into a hollow basin of stone. The light there was wrong, too soft, too white, as though it had come from somewhere other than the sun. Shadows didn't fall, they clung. And right at the centre, half crouched as if frozen in the act of turning, stood a figure carved in perfect detail. Armour, veins, an open mouth straining for breath that would never come. It took a heartbeat to understand what I was seeing. The pose wasn't heroic, It was terrified. Not statue, soldier, not stone by craft, but by curse. That was the first proof, my son, that what waited in Arcadia was no legend. It was alive, and it wanted us to see what happened to those who looked back. Something watched us long before we ever found it, and it was still deciding whether we deserved to leave. Chapter 4. Proof in the Dark. Listen closely, my son. The stars above Sparta are honest, but not everything that shines tells the truth. That first statue, the soldier carved in a moment of fear, stole the last of our certainty. We'd seen battlefields turn to ruin. We'd marched through plague and fire, but never through a place where courage itself seemed to have failed mid-breath. The figure crouched as if bracing for a blow that had never landed. The stone skin caught the torchlight and threw it back like polished bone. You could see every vein, every tear line along his cheek. He had been alive once. There was no denying it. Demetrios stepped close, brushing dust from the man's shoulder. The sound was wrong, no rasp of grit, just a dull metallic click, like touching something that refused to decay. He said nothing. None of us did. The air felt stale, already used by other lungs. The metallic scent grew thick enough to taste. It coated the tongue, sour and ancient, the way blood dries on armor left too long in the sun. We followed the path deeper into the hollow. The light shifted until even the flames seemed reluctant to stay lit. Every few paces, another form emerged, men and women caught in motion, a hand raised, a cry frozen. One statue knelt as if shielding a child, another reached out towards someone who was no longer there. These weren't works of worship, they were warnings written in flesh that had turned to stone. I ran my fingers along one woman's face, and the cold bit so deep it burned. Fear changes shape, my son. It can become reverence if you look at it too long. The pass opened wider, the roof of rock bending above like the inside of a giant's ribs. In the half-light, our shadows elongated, twisting into shapes that didn't match our movements. Demetrios lifted his torch higher and the glow revealed more of them, dozens of figures crowding the walls, their mouths open in a single, soundless cry. I remember thinking it looked like a choir that had forgotten the song but still tried to sing. Someone whispered a prayer under his breath. I can't recall who. The sound was swallowed instantly, leaving only the quiet scrape of sandals over stone. The deeper we went, the louder the silence seemed to get, as if it were filling every empty space left by the words we were too afraid to speak. Then it came. A noise from above, faint and careful, a single pebble slipping loose. We froze. The sound shouldn't have meant anything. Rock falls, wind moves, time erodes. But the wind had died hours ago, and in Arcadia, chance felt like fiction. The pebble bounced once, then stopped, as if something unseen had caught it mid-drop. A new noise followed, soft and rhythmic, sliding through the dark. It wasn't stone shifting, it was the drag of scales against rock. Demetrios broke the spell with a whisper. "Move." His voice was dry, almost brittle. We obeyed, keeping the torches low, the shields close. The statues flanked our path like witnesses to a ritual no one living should perform. I could swear some of them had changed. A head tilted slightly, a mouth parted wider. Maybe it was the flicker of the flame. Maybe it wasn't. When at last the pass spat us into open air, the relief tasted wrong. The sky above the ravine burned red with dusk, yet the cold didn't leave my skin. We stopped by a line of broken stones, what might once have been a wall, and beyond them, across a gulf of shadow, rose the outline of a temple. Columns cracked but standing, glowing faintly with the last light of day. It sat like a tooth in the jaw of the mountain, waiting for something to bite. That was where the hiss lived. That was where the oracle's riddle pointed. Demetrios stood silent for a long time before speaking. His voice trembled, but his pride tried to hide it. "We end this tomorrow," he said, but I saw the truth in his eyes, the realization that endings are rarely gifts. Night fell quick. We made no fire. Even darkness has rules, and Arcadia enforced them. I couldn't sleep. My eyes stayed fixed on the black mouth of the temple. Somewhere in that silence, a sound uncoiled, slow, steady, almost human, a hiss layered with something softer beneath it, sorrow disguised as breath. The song of a thing that remembered being wronged. When dawn came, we were no longer 10. 2 cloaks lay empty by the rocks, footprints ending where the night began. The oracle had told the truth, my son. The hiss did turn men to stone, just not all at once. Chapter 5. The haunting intensifies. You can feel when a place decides to keep you. Arcadia had made its choice by morning. The air was damp, swollen with that same metallic sweetness, and the light, if it could still be called that, had turned pale as bone. The road to the temple wound upward along the ravine, a spine of rock leading straight into the mouth of something too patient to need to hunt. I remember each step as if it left a mark on the years themselves. Our armor groaned. Breath rasped against the inside of my helm. The silence was so complete that even the sound of our hearts felt intrusive. The temple loomed larger the closer we came. From afar, it had looked small, half-ruined. Up close, it was vast, a wound in the earth pretending to be architecture. Columns leaned at broken angles, etched with carvings worn smooth by centuries of regret. Ivy hung in black threads, long dead but unwilling to fall. The front was open, an unblinking eye of darkness. From that void came the sound that had haunted our nights, a chorus of whispers pressed through clenched teeth, layered hisses overlapping until they became breath itself. Beneath them ran a slow rhythm, the pulse of something alive but tired of pretending it wasn't. The youngest of us, Thalos and Eryx, began to shake. I remember their faces, pale beneath bronze. They whispered prayers to gods who had never listened before. Demetrios barked a warning, his voice scraping the silence like metal across stone, but the command held no weight. When men understand they're already ghosts, orders mean little. The 2 broke ranks, turned and ran down the slope, their sandals scattering loose rock. Demetrios called after them, but the words vanished before they reached the air. The hissing deepened, not angry, amused, the sound of something that had seen this before. I wanted to believe they escaped, that they found sunlight somewhere the curse could not follow. But Arcadia doesn't give back what it takes. We never saw them again. We pressed on. The rest of us, 5 now, formed a line, shields high. I tried to steady my thoughts, to treat the fear as another weapon, something to be sharpened, aimed, and spent. Yet every instinct told me that we were not marching to victory. We were walking into memory, called there by the echo of someone else's sorrow. The oracle's words returned. Silence the hiss. I'd thought it meant destruction. I was beginning to wonder if it meant understanding. The steps to the temple were slick with dew. Each stone felt soft beneath my feet, as if it had been warmed from within. I touched one and felt the faint tremor of movement, like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. When Demetrios lifted his torch, the flame bent toward the entrance, pulled inward as though drawn by breath. He muttered a curse, the kind a Spartan keeps for when steel fails. Then, without looking back, he stepped inside. The darkness swallowed him whole. I followed because duty was all I had left. The others came after, the sound of our armor muffled by the heavy air. Inside, The world changed. The temperature dropped. Our breaths turned to mist. The walls sweated moisture that smelled of iron. Torchlight painted the carvings along the corridor. Women with serpents for hair, men kneeling before them, their faces carved in terror. The deeper we went, the colder it became. Each breath burned. A drop of liquid fell from above, landing on my shoulder. It wasn't water. It clung, thick and faintly green. Venom. I wiped it off with a trembling hand and pretended I hadn't seen it glow before sinking into the cloth. Somewhere behind me, Alexios whispered a prayer, the same he'd spoken around the fire when courage was still a thing we owned. Demetrios silenced him with a hiss of his own, but fear had already found its voice. The temple was alive with it. The hissing surrounded us now, above, below, behind. It wasn't noise anymore, it was language we couldn't understand. It said, "You came as they all do." It said, "The curse still remembers." It said, "Listen." When we reached the first fork in the corridor, I realized the truth we'd ignored all along. Arcadia wasn't a battlefield. It was an altar, and we had marched straight into its prayer. The hiss didn't chase us that day. It welcomed us home. Chapter 6. The Hidden Past. The torchlight trembled in Demetrios's hand as we entered a chamber large enough to swallow an army. The ceiling disappeared into shadow and the walls glimmered faintly, slick with veins of moisture that looked almost alive. The air here was different, still but full, heavy with age, memory, and something like grief. Even the hiss had changed. It wasn't hunting us anymore. It was breathing with us, as though the temple itself had lungs. We fanned out, our torches painting long arcs of light across the walls. At first I thought the carvings were patterns, marks left by time, but when the glow steadied, I saw stories written in stone. Women with snakes coiled around their arms, a priestess kneeling before a goddess, the same priestess dragged down by a man crowned with waves, Poseidon, and then Athena, striking her down instead of the god. The last panel showed the woman transformed, her hair twisting into serpents, her face frozen in despair. Medusa. The name whispered itself through my mind before I dared speak it. So this was no myth, no soldier's superstition. This was the origin of the hiss, the echo of betrayal carved into rock. I remember the faces of my brothers, their eyes following the tale around the chamber, each man understanding at the same moment. The oracle had not sent us to slay a beast. She had sent us into the memory of a god's cruelty. Demetrios said nothing, but the tremor in his breath betrayed him. Even Spartans have limits, and faith can turn to dust when it sees the truth. We followed the carvings deeper into a spiral passage that curled down like a serpent's body. The air grew colder with each step. Statues lined the curve. Warriors, hunters, mothers, all turned to stone mid-motion, their terror so vivid it looked wet. Every one of them faced inward, toward the center of the spiral, as if something there demanded witness. The hiss rose and fell in rhythm with our steps, and beneath it, faintly, came the sound of weeping. Not rage, not pain, just the sorrow of someone too tired to be angry anymore. At the bottom of the spiral, we found an archway blocked by a fallen slab of marble, cracked open just enough for a man to squeeze through. From the gap came a faint blue light, pale, cold, impossible. I could feel its pulse against my face like breath through stone. Demetrios went first, forcing the opening wider. The sound that escaped was not a hiss but a sigh, long and mournful, like air leaving a dying body. We slipped inside one by one, and the world behind us vanished. The chamber beyond was circular, wide enough that our torches barely reached the walls. In its center stood a pedestal, and upon it a statue of a kneeling woman. Her head bowed, her hands pressed to her chest. Her hair, a mass of serpents frozen mid-motion, caught the light in glints of dull green. Tears had been carved down her face, trailing to her throat. She wasn't monstrous. She was mourning. I stepped closer. The stone radiated cold. Every detail was too perfect. The tremor in her fingers, the despair in the tilt of her mouth. She was praying, not attacking. This wasn't a shrine. It was a tomb. The others formed a half circle, shields up, as if waiting for the statue to move. I remember whispering, "She cries because no one listens." The words left my mouth before I realized I'd spoken them. Demetrios ignored me, his discipline clinging to him like armor that no longer fit. He raised his torch, testing the shadows. The flame flared bright, then guttered. The hiss surged up from the floor, not air, not voice, but vibration. The pedestal shuddered. Dust drifted from the statue's hair. One serpent shifted, just a fraction, but enough to split the world into before and after. The serpent's eyes opened. Demetrios stumbled back, his torch shaking. I couldn't move. The carved woman's tears glistened as though wet, and the sound of weeping filled the chamber again. Louder now, heartbreak turned to breath. She wasn't dead. She had never been dead. The temple was her body, and we were standing in its heart. That was the first time I understood, my son. Some curses aren't punishments. They're memories that refuse to forget. If this story's pulling you in, hit the like button. It helps more insomniacs find their next sleepless night. Chapter 7. Breaking Point. The torchlight sputtered, then died, as though the flame itself understood what it had seen and wanted no part of it. The darkness that followed was not an absence. It was alive, thick, patient. It pressed against our skin, tasting the sweat, feeling the pulse beneath. Somewhere in that suffocating black stone scraped against stone, slow as breath. I whispered Demetrios's name, but the sound felt wrong, too loud, too human. He struck flint until a single spark caught, and for an instant, the world returned, a trembling pool of light around his shaking hands. The statue had moved, not much, just enough to change everything. Her head had turned, now facing us. The serpents in her hair were poised mid-motion, their scales glistening faintly as if sweating venom. Her expression was not anger, it was recognition. We froze, caught between disbelief and awe. Alexios gasped, dropping his torch. It rolled, throwing wild light across the walls, and what that light revealed carved itself into my mind forever. The floor beneath us was split with cracks glowing faintly blue, and within those fractures were faces, hundreds of them, men and women trapped beneath translucent stone, their mouths open in silent screams. The entire chamber was built on their bodies. Lycomedes, our eldest, fell to his knees. "We shouldn't have come," he muttered, his voice cracked by terror and grief. The words hung in the air like smoke. Demetrios grabbed him by the arm, shouting, "Stand, soldier!" But even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed him. Fear had hollowed him out from the inside. The ground trembled. The cracks widened, pulsing with light like veins of fire. A hiss rose from beneath us, soft, constant, mournful. It wasn't one voice anymore. It was thousands, weaving together into a sound too big for air. The serpents on the statue shifted again, not in rage but in restless sorrow. Dust fell like snow. "Eyes down," Demetrios ordered. "Remember the reflection." He angled his shield, using its bronze face as a mirror. I did the same, the curved metal warping the scene into something barely tolerable. Through the distorted reflection, I saw her hands unclasp from her chest, slow and deliberate. The flakes of stone falling from her arms revealed skin beneath, pale, veined with light. She wasn't emerging. She was remembering. A sound followed, low and intimate. A sigh, the kind a mother gives when the child she's lost finally speaks her name. The hiss softened into a rhythm. Inhale, exhale, sorrow turned to song. The serpents lifted, swaying as one, not threatening, but pleading. Lycomedes rose suddenly, panic overtaking discipline. He ran for the exit, shouting words that broke apart halfway into a sob. He didn't make it. The hiss sharpened into a single piercing note, vibrating the air like a blade. Light burst from the cracks beneath him, crawling up his legs. In one breath, he was man. In the next, stone, frozen mid-step, mouth open, eyes wide with something worse than fear. Understanding. We backed away, shields trembling in our hands. The chamber pulsed like a living thing. The floor flexed, dust falling from above in slow cascades. The hissing layered itself into harmonies, voices upon voices, until it felt as if sorrow itself had learned to breathe. Demetrios's torch flickered out again. Darkness swallowed us whole. Then came the whisper. Not through the air, but through the marrow of our bones. Please, don't look at me. It wasn't command. It was plea. A cry centuries old, asking not to be seen as a monster anymore. I felt my knees weaken, the sound tunneling straight into my heart, scraping memory from places I didn't know I had. Demetrios turned toward the voice, shield lifted, trembling. His breath came ragged, words barely forming. "We find the source," he said. It wasn't bravery anymore. It was obsession. We stepped forward, leaving Lycomedes behind, his stone hand pointing toward salvation he'd never reach. The hiss grew softer, warmer, almost kind. And that was when I understood what the oracle had never said outright. This wasn't a hunt. It was a summoning. We hadn't found her. She had called us. Some places don't wait for men to trespass. They remember the ones they need. Chapter 8. The Confrontation begins. The tunnel that followed was a throat, narrow, damp, curling downward as if swallowing us one breath at a time. The hissing had changed. It was softer now, almost guiding, like a hand leading us through darkness. Each step sank deeper into warmth that shouldn't have existed this far beneath the mountain. The torches hissed and cracked, the flames bowing forward as though drawn toward some unseen heart. The walls shimmered faintly. When I pressed my palm to one, it pulsed, slow, steady, alive. I snatched my hand back. The others said nothing. Even Demetrios's orders had turned to gestures. There are moments, my son, when fear no longer shouts. It listens. This was one of them. The passage opened without warning into a vast chamber. A pool of still water spread before us, its surface so smooth it reflected the torchlight perfectly, doubling every movement. The air above it shimmered, heavy with heat or energy. I couldn't tell which. And there, at the center of the pool on an island of marble, knelt a figure. At first, I thought she was another statue. Then the torchlight found her skin, pale stone dusted with the sheen of tears. Her head bowed, her long arms resting on her knees. The serpents in her hair stirred lazily, their scales whispering like leaves in windless air. For the first time, the hiss had rhythm, not threat, breath drawn in sorrow, exhaled in resignation. Demetrios raised his shield, using its reflection to study her form. "It's her," he whispered, though he didn't need to say it. We all knew. The air trembled around her like sound just before thunder. I lowered my gaze to the reflection in the water, careful not to meet her directly. Through the ripples, I saw movement that was not menace, but mourning. She wept without sound, shoulders trembling. The snakes coiled and uncoiled, their motions protective, gentle. Every tear that fell into the pool echoed softly, a single note of grief, repeated forever. I should have felt triumph, proof of the myth, the end of our quest. But all I felt was pity. No monster waits like that. No beast cries for centuries. Demetrios, still a commander even as the world crumbled around him, took a step forward. The marble cracked beneath his heel, the sound sharp and final. The snakes froze. Her head tilted just slightly, like a sleeper disturbed. The hissing deepened, rising from low breath to tremor. The torches bent toward her, their flames stretching as if longing to touch. I reached out instinctively. "Wait!" But the word was too slow. The hiss became a voice. A woman's voice, rough with age, yet fragile as silk. "Why do you come to me?" The sound hit like wind through broken glass, soft but carrying centuries. Her voice wasn't wrath, it was disbelief, a wound reopened. None of us could speak. We'd expected rage, not recognition. Demetrios found his tongue first. "We came to end the curse," he said. His tone shook but clung to pride. "The oracle sent us." The hissing changed again, half laugh, half grief. "The oracle sent many," she said. None listened. The serpents lifted, their eyes glimmering gold in the half-light. Her tears fell faster, steaming where they struck the stone. The chamber itself seemed to breathe with her. I could feel something pressing against my chest, heavy and human. Pity, yes, but also understanding. I said quietly, "We don't want to harm you." The snakes turned in my direction, their eyes catching the torchlight like a constellation. Her voice softened. "Then don't look at me." The words cut through me. Not command, not curse, warning, compassion twisted into despair. Demetrios stepped closer, defiance warring with reason. "I am not afraid," he murmured. I wanted to stop him, but it was already too late. Her sorrow was waking. The air rippled, torchlight bending. I could see her trembling now, not in threat, but exhaustion. She raised her hands, palms open, snakes rising with her like weary guardians. The hiss deepened until it filled every hollow of the chamber, a sound vast enough to shake the soul. "Lykaon," Demetrios said through his teeth. "Ready yourself." "For what?" I whispered. "You can't kill grief." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was clear. We hadn't been sent to slay a monster. We'd been sent to bear witness. And when sorrow finds an audience, my son, it never stops speaking. Chapter 9. Revelation in the Shadows. The silence that followed her words was unbearable. Even the fire in our torches seemed to hold its breath. I could feel every drop of blood moving through me, each heartbeat louder than sound. The air trembled between us, the space where prayers go to die. When Medusa finally spoke again, her voice wasn't a voice at all. It was memory drifting between grief and confession. "You came to free yourselves from what the gods made you see," she said. Her tone wasn't accusation, it was weary understanding. The snakes on her shoulders swayed gently, their hiss fading to a murmur that almost sounded like rain. Demetrios stood rigid, shield half raised. "You are cursed," he said, his voice shaking like a cracked blade. "The oracle sent us to silence you." The air around her shimmered. "Silence me," she whispered. "I have been silent for centuries." I begged for mercy and they gave me myth. I remember the moment her words struck me, not in my ears, but deeper, where the truth hides from language. The temple walls flickered with her story, painted in light and shadow. I saw her as she had been, a priestess once devoted to wisdom and purity. I saw the god of the sea take what he wanted, leaving her broken on the floor of Athena's temple. And I saw the goddess she'd served twist that pain into punishment. Beauty became horror. Faith became exile. The snakes stirred, as though remembering the moment they first drew breath from her tears. The goddess I worshipped turned her eyes away, Medusa said, voice trembling. She made me into the reflection of men's cruelty. I became their fear so they could remain innocent. Her sorrow crawled through me, slow and cold, until I wanted to look up, to see her face, to tell her she was not alone. But instinct kept my gaze fixed on the reflection trembling in my shield. There, her image rippled, not monstrous, but human. The snakes leaned toward her like children seeking comfort. Demetrios faltered. I could hear it in his breathing, the collapse of certainty. He lowered his shield an inch. The oracle lied. He whispered, "You are no curse." "Don't," I said sharply. "Keep your eyes down." He hesitated, torn between duty and revelation. "Lykaon," he murmured, "she deserves to be seen." And that, my son, was the moment everything turned. The air brightened, a sickly green glow rising from the cracks in the floor. The snakes lifted in perfect unison, their eyes burning faint gold. The hiss grew deeper, layered with something human. A sob stretched into eternity. The water in the pool quivered, reflecting fragments of her movement. She was trembling, her grief turning to something vast and uncontrollable. I spoke softly, afraid my voice might break her spell. "Medusa," I said, "we came because they said your sorrow turns men to stone. But maybe it's not sorrow that kills. It's the refusal to hear it." Her head tilted slightly, though I couldn't see her eyes. Her voice came quieter than before, almost tender. "You pity me." "I understand you," I said. "No," she breathed. "You see me." For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then the chamber erupted with sound, the hiss swelling into a storm. The torches blew out. Darkness surged like water around us. I saw only flashes through the bronze reflection, the ripple of her robe, the glint of serpents, the shimmer of tears that refused to fall. Demetrios gasped behind me, a sound halfway between awe and surrender. "She's beautiful," he said, and looked up. The light from the cracks flared, blinding. His body stiffened, the sound of metal against stone filling the air. When the glow dimmed, he was still, shield half raised, eyes open, mouth parted in silent wonder. Turned to stone, but not in terror, in peace. I stared at him through the warped bronze of my shield. He hadn't died in fear. He'd been released from belief. Medusa turned toward me then, though I didn't need to look to feel it. Her gaze brushed the edges of my vision like light warming skin. "You will live," she said softly. "You will remember." "Why me?" I whispered. "Because you listened." Her voice broke. "Go before mercy fades." I backed away slowly, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The snakes settled, their eyes dimming, their motions slow as breath. I turned without daring a final glance and walked into the dark that had led me here. The hiss followed, no longer a threat, but a farewell. Soft, human, full of the kind of sadness that outlives gods. Sometimes the only mercy left in this world, my son, is to be the one who remembers. Chapter 10. The Night of Terror. The corridors twisted like the inside of a dying creature, warm, wet, endless. Every turn bled into another. My torch sputtered, coughing up weak light that clung to the stone like breath on glass. I remember thinking I was climbing out of her grief, only to realize I was still inside it. The air carried that same metallic sweetness, heavier now, thick enough to taste. The hiss wasn't behind me anymore. It was everywhere, under my skin, inside my pulse, whispering through the bones of the mountain. I stumbled into a chamber I didn't remember entering. The walls pulsed faintly green, veins of light crawling across them like roots under flesh. On the floor lay fragments of shields and spears, the remains of other men who had come before. Their bronze glimmered faintly, half buried in dust, carrying the shapes of the ones who'd held them. A few bore the mark of Sparta. One still had Demetrios's emblem carved near the rim, a lambda scratched by hand, proof that he had lived long enough to carry it here. I knelt and ran my fingers over the dented metal. The chill of it stung my palm. That's when I heard her again, not the hiss, but the voice. "You pity me," she said. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, soft as air leaking through stone. "Yet you still bring the sound of war." "I bring what I am," I answered. My voice cracked. "A soldier. A man who obeyed." "You bring what they made you," she whispered. A shape moved beyond the light, fluid, deliberate. I lifted my shield, using it like a mirror. The reflection caught only fragments, the slow sway of serpents, the outline of a bowed head, tears turning to steam as they touched the floor. She stepped closer. I could hear the scrape of her bare feet against the stone, the slow rhythm of someone walking toward forgiveness they never believed in. "Do you know what they feared most?" she asked. Her tone had softened to something close to wonder. Not my gaze, my grief. Her reflection sharpened, and I saw her eyes clearly for the first time, not glowing, not monstrous. They shimmered like the last light before dawn. The snakes hung still, resting. For a heartbeat, I thought she might touch my face. My throat locked, breath trembling. "I heard your name before I saw your face," I said. "They used it to frighten us." "To make courage look easy. No one listens long enough to hear," she murmured. A drop of venom fell from one serpent and struck the floor between us. It hissed, burning a small hole through the stone, releasing a puff of green smoke that smelled faintly of the sea. The air tightened, pressing down on my chest until it hurt to breathe. "I want to leave," I whispered. "Then go," she said, her voice barely sound. "But you will never stop hearing me." The snakes lifted, not in anger, but like a tide returning to shore. The hiss deepened again, layered, melodic, the song of every life she had turned to stone. My torch flared violently, light bursting out in ragged pulses. The ground shuddered beneath me. Somewhere far above, the mountain groaned. "I'm sorry," I said, though I didn't know which of us I meant it for. She tilted her head, the serpents following like shadows. "Forgive yourself," she whispered. "That is all I ever wanted." Then came the sound, the scream that wasn't scream at all. It was her sorrow made flesh, the echo of centuries of punishment finally allowed to breathe. It tore through the temple, shaking the dust from the ceiling, extinguishing my torch. I ran. I didn't choose a direction. I only followed what little light my mind invented to keep me moving. The hiss followed too, weaving through the dark, not chasing but accompanying, its rhythm syncing with my heart, its breath matching mine. I fell once, hard, scraping my palms raw against the floor. When I rose, a faint glow waited ahead. Daylight, thin as mercy. The final corridor opened, and I burst through it like a drowning man breaking the surface. Dawn struck me full in the face. I collapsed onto the rocks outside, coughing, shaking, alive. The temple behind me was silent again, its doorway nothing more than shadow. I turned once, just once, For a heartbeat, I saw her silhouette framed by the darkness, head bowed, still. Then it was gone. The hiss faded with the wind, finding a new home somewhere deep within my chest. When I looked into my shield, the reflection staring back wasn't mine. Her eyes blinked through the bronze, shimmering with tears that weren't mine to shed. That's when I knew, my son, the curse hadn't ended. It had only learned my name. Chapter 11. The Aftershock. Dawn broke like mercy that didn't belong to me. I remember the way the sun cut across the ravine, sharp, cold, almost pitying. I lay on the rocks for hours before I could move, staring at the sky that finally made a sound again. The world felt thinner, fragile, as if one wrong breath would tear it open. When I stood, my legs shook. I told myself it was from exhaustion, not fear. A soldier's lie, spoken to no one. The others were gone. All that remained were the traces of what they'd carried. Demetrios's shield cracked in half, Alexios's cloak tangled in thorns, Lycomedes's spear snapped clean down the middle. 10 Spartans had marched into Arcadia, only one crawled out. The temple loomed behind me, its columns glowing gold under the rising sun. For a heartbeat, it almost looked holy again, as if daylight could forgive it. But the shadow inside was absolute. I turned my back to it, pretending that made me free. I buried what was left of my brothers along the ridge. No names, no markers, just small mounds of earth. The soil felt soft, too soft, as though it had already swallowed men before. I whispered the only prayer that ever seemed honest after that night. Be remembered. That's all I could give them. Memory. The road home blurred. Days passed without sound. When I finally saw the hills of Sparta again, the sun was bright, the people louder than I remembered. Children ran through the courtyards, shouting, playing, fearless. When they saw my armour, they called out my name, Lykaon, the Gorgon Slayer. They made it sound like victory. They wanted stories of glory, of battle and blood and the monster I had conquered. I gave them what they wanted. Truth doesn't sit well in daylight. The city celebrated me. They held a feast, songs were sung, and men toasted my courage. I smiled, but the taste of iron never left my mouth. At night, when the torches burned low and laughter softened to murmurs, I'd hear it again, the faint hiss threading through the quiet, sometimes from the window, sometimes from the walls, sometimes from nowhere at all. I filled the house with noise, the crackle of a brazier, the scrape of sandals, the clatter of tools, anything to keep silence from creeping in. But silence always finds its way back. It waits until you forget it exists, then reminds you that you're never alone. One night, the hiss came so softly it almost sounded like breath beside my ear. And then, a whisper. You looked away. The words weren't reproach. They were fact. The voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much to be angry anymore. I dreamed often of her. Medusa, not as the monster they named her, but as the woman I saw in the reflection of my shield. Her tears gleamed like starlight in still water. In the dreams, she didn't curse me. She simply watched until I woke, trembling, my body stiff with the echo of stone. Years passed. My hair greyed, my sword rusted, but she stayed. Not in flesh or vision, but in sound. The faint hiss beneath every breath, the whisper that lingered when the wind died. I began to understand the oracle's words. Silence, a sorrowful hiss that turns brave men to stone. We silenced it, yes, but not by killing it. We carried it instead. Now, when rain falls, I hear her voice in it, the countless drops hissing against the earth, whispering forgiveness. Some men say the gods speak through thunder. I think they speak through grief. Remember this, my son. We don't survive curses, we inherit them, and some of us learn to live inside the sound. Chapter 12. The Last Knock. I am old now. My hands shake when I hold the cup, and my sword hangs on the wall as little more than a ghost of what it was. But the hiss remains. It lives beneath my breath, threaded through every heartbeat. I've grown used to it, like the echo of the sea you hear when you press a shell to your ear. Some nights it's soft, almost kind. Other nights it waits, patient and alive, for the silence to grow deep enough to speak again. I sit outside often now, under the stars of Sparta. The world has changed. Children still whisper my name as a story of glory. They call me Lykaon, the Gorgon Slayer, the man who killed the serpent-haired monster in the north. They never ask why I leave a lamp burning through the night. They never wonder why I startle when the wind turns still. My legend comforts them, and I let it. The truth is heavier than the sword that once carried it. But tonight, the wind has stopped. The lamp burns low. The house feels smaller, tighter, as though it's listening again. I should feed the flame, but I don't move. My body remembers what my mind denies, the scent in the air faint and metallic, like the forest before the hiss first spoke. Then it comes, a soft scrape at the door. Once, then again. I tell myself it's the wind shifting the wood, a branch, a mouse, anything but what I know it is. The scrape becomes a knock, 3 slow taps, deliberate and patient. I stop breathing. The air thickens. My heart pounds like it did in the temple, loud, desperate, human. The torchlight flickers. Somewhere in the dark, something stirs, and the hiss returns, soft, steady, achingly familiar. Then from the corner of the room, a whisper. Lykaon. Her voice is as I remember it, low, sorrowful, almost tender. I turn my head slowly, afraid that sudden movement might shatter what little barrier remains between the world of men and whatever waits beyond it. She stands where the lamplight ends, her shape wavering like heat above stone. The snakes move slowly, peacefully. Her eyes are closed, as if sleep has finally found her. You carried it well, she says. My throat tightens. Words don't come easily anymore. You listened, she whispers. You saw me. I nod, though the motion feels heavy, as though my bones remember the weight of stone. The gods forget, she says softly. But I do not. She reaches out, her hand pale as moonlight. When her fingers brush my cheek, they are cold, but gentle. For a heartbeat, I see her as she once was, a woman wronged, punished for what she endured, cursed for her beauty and her truth. A priestess betrayed by the gods she served. Now you understand, she says, and I do. The curse was never death, it was remembrance, to carry her sorrow so it would not vanish with her silence, to bear witness when the gods demanded the world forget. Her hand lingers for a moment, then fades. The snakes unravel into wisps of shadow. Her outline dissolves, leaving only the whisper of her voice. The last sound you hear is not my hiss, it's my forgiveness. The flame in the lamp gutters out. The room falls to darkness. For a long time, I sit in the stillness, listening. There is no fear now, only quiet, the kind that follows understanding. And then, just before the world exhales, I hear it again. A faint hiss, gentle, almost human. It winds through the air, slips across the floor, and settles deep within my chest. I close my eyes. The sound fades into breath. And for the first time in all these years, I sleep. If this story followed you into the dark, he whispers, share it with someone who'll never sleep the same again.